Hello and welcome back, everyone, to Immigration Talk. I'm your host, Pastor Pradhan, and today we have an exciting and highly informative session lined up for you. But before we move ahead with what our topic of discussion is going to be, and I even introduce you to our guest for today, I have this very important disclaimer, and that is by watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided to you by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. Once again, friends, thank you so much for joining us. We are streaming live right now on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. And let me tell you that you can also participate in this session by commenting. So, whatever questions you have, especially with regard to the topic of discussion for today, it'll be very nice if you can comment them, and we will definitely make some time later in this session to answer to your questions. So thank you so much for joining us. And definitely, I mean, the 2024 US presidential elections have really stirred up a lot of discussions, and people are really anxious also, especially when it comes to immigration policies. So, with potential changes on the horizon, many of you are wondering maybe what will happen to US study and work permits in 2025. So, to help us navigate and dive into this really very critical topic today, I'm really thrilled to introduce you to our esteemed guest who is going to join us today for the first time on Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. None other than attorney David Garson. David is the founding partner of Garson Immigration Law, one of Canada's premier immigration firms, and he is a certified specialist in citizenship and immigration law, recognized by the Law Society of Ontario, and is ranked among the top 9 immigration lawyers in Canada by Chambers and Partners. So, David's extensive knowledge and expertise and experience in this field definitely makes him the perfect expert to help us in this topic today. So, without further ado, please help me welcome David Garson for the first time on Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. Thank you so much, David, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely lovely. And maybe you would like to tell us a little more about yourself, something you may want to highlight or tell us about
Uh,
yourself, anything at all.
sure. I've been practicing immigration law for over 30 years. I'm dual licensed in Canada and the United States. We help individuals enter Canada and we help them go to the United States. So, I mean, we've seen a lot of what has been going on over the years, and immigration has, as it's been influenced by politics, and frankly speaking, politics has been influenced by immigration. So it's a very interesting time that we're facing right now, without a doubt. There's an old curse, though, may you live in interesting times. So I imagine that there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of questions that people have, including me, because I know we're going to get into questions and you may hear this a lot from me going forward, but we really don't know much yet. We know what the intent is. We know what this administration had done previously when it was in power, or this president, but we don't know necessarily what is going to happen in the next 4 years. But there have been some indications. There's been some statements on the campaign trail, and I think we can try to piece together or guess, prognosticate as we go. So I look forward to it.
Me too, me too. And definitely with your expertise and experience, I'm sure your perspective is going to add a lot to the viewers out there. I mean, who are all anxious, want to know more, what is going to happen. And some of them are even maybe, fired up to even acting quickly. So maybe you might want to warn them or give out some tips to relax them. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, David, once again for joining us. And as we already have said about the topic of discussion, today's topic is US study and work permits, what to expect in 2025 after the elections. So I'm sure folks out there are very, very excited. And I can already see some comments popping up. So thank you so much, Supriya, our first uh, viewer who has commented with a question. Please stay with us. We will address your question a little later. So, David, are you ready for our questions now?
Sure, let's go.
Let's go. So, do you anticipate changes in US study and work permits under the new administration, particularly for international students and foreign workers?
Well, it's an interesting question because, as many people may remember, under the last administration, they did try to enact legislation or presidential orders stopping people from coming or stopping students from coming and regarding work permits, but the courts overturned them on various occasions. So whenever they were attempted to try to sort of enact things or move forward, the courts sort of made them take a step back. So in the end, they didn't really get a lot done legislatively, meaning they didn't pass a lot of laws with regard to be restrictive. But what they did do, and what they can do again, is you can work within the system to make things more difficult if you're so inclined. I'll give you an example. If somebody makes an application for a student visa, as many people who are watching probably know, you have to satisfy the State Department or the consulate of a few things, one of which is that you have temporary intent. Now, that's a very broad concept, temporary intent, right? You have to show that you are willing to go back to your home country at the end of your studies. So to do that, you present a lot of documentation. You show you have bank accounts, or you have ties, you have family, you may own property, job offers, things of the sort. So you keep doing this and you go to the consulate and you say, okay, I've been accepted to whatever, for University of Pennsylvania. And here's the proof that I've been accepted. Here's my I-20, which is the document you have to present. And here's my proof that I have ties. A consular officer can look at it because it's very discretionary and say, okay, I'm satisfied with those ties. Fine, we're going to give you the student visa. Or a consular officer can say, no, not satisfied, not good enough. Now, if an administration wanted to curtail the number of students that come into the country, then what they can do is simply tell the State Department, which tells its officers, perhaps look at these applications a bit more critically. Maybe there may be another set of criteria we want you to examine in that regard. So they can make things more difficult without changing any legislation for people from getting student visas. So let's say that somebody does get a student visa and they come into the country and they go to school, as many people know as well. At the end of their schooling, they can get something called an OPT, optional practical training, for a year. And then subsequently, under the Obama administration, they said they can extend that by 2 years, okay, if you're in a STEM field, okay? They could take away that. That was something that the Obama administration put into effect. That's not something you have to have. And certainly that means that in terms of being able to work at the end of your studies, they could make that 1 year, they can make it shorter, they could play with the STEM time frame, they could play with the OPT time frame. So I guess what I'm saying here is, what do we think is going to happen? I think that if they want to make it more restrictive, they can do a lot just with what the legislation and the rules that are on the books. And then subsequent to that, in terms of working afterwards, they can make it more difficult based on how they want to work the work permits after you graduate.
Okay. So we can definitely expect another layer of scrutiny or maybe tightening of.
I was going to say, and there may be a question going forward that we want to, yes, I think based on previous experience, but remember when I started, I said that politics play a huge role in immigration, meaning especially the people that advise the president with regard to this. In his last administration, there was a fellow named Stephen Miller who was advising President Trump on immigration. Now, Stephen Miller was a pretty restrictive guy with regard to immigration. He had thoughts and policies that meant you couldn't, he wanted to narrow the ability for people to come to the United States. I don't know, or I haven't heard that he's advising President Trump this administration. In fact, he's taking a lot of advice from Elon Musk. Now, I'm a guessing man. If you guess, Elon Musk would know the value of foreign workers, and especially people in STEM fields, with regard to what he does. So if he's advising President Trump and he says, okay, listen, we need people, let's say, with regard to the H1s or OPTs, because these are the individuals that we need in the tech sector or the manufacturing sector or the innovation sector. And so maybe let's not be as harsh as we were previously.
So there we go, friends. And I think along these lines, we are going to definitely dive deeper and we have more questions and more people joining us. So I'm really happy. Hello to George, if I'm pronouncing it right. Hello, George in LinkedIn. And we have Namrata Reddy, Jayakumar. Please stay with us. We are going to take up your questions for sure. So, David, my next question is what specific policies do you expect Trump administration to implement in 2025 that could affect students applying for F1 visa or those already in OPT?
I'm thinking, as I said before, that they are going to be more restrictive with regard. This is what I expect. Everything I'm saying here is I'm just guessing the same as you, but based on what I've seen and based on what I've heard, I do expect them to be somewhat more restrictive with regard to issuing F1 visas than they have been. I also expect them to be somewhat more watchful. I mean, I don't think they enjoyed seeing, and especially they spoke out on the campaign trail, all of the occupied at the universities in terms of the encampments. I think that was something that was not something that this Republican Party or certainly this president wants to see going forward. So I think there may be somewhat more restrictions and or variations that are imposed on individuals with regard to what they do when they do come to the United States, if they get their F1. And if they do act in a certain way when they're here that doesn't exactly or expressly have to do with going to school, then there may be further actions that can be taken against them with regard to leaving the United States. In terms of work permits, you know, as I said, they got slapped a lot last time they were in power with regard to changing the law. So they acted or created situations that gave them what they wanted to do. They slowed down processing. They made it there. The amount of denials increased in terms of the percentage. So they can do things like that. I would guess, based on what they've done before, that that's what they'll do again.
Okay. Okay, but it's really nice to have, your point of view, your perspective on this. So thank you so much, David, for doing this with us today. And also,
Right.
since we're talking about students, maybe you could tell us what challenges should students be prepared for, especially student visas on F1 and work visas H1B.
So when you're coming in, and as I said, when you're asking, I mean, if somebody's applying for an F1, you know, the easiest way to refuse a person, if they have the money to pay and if they have the money to support themselves and if they have been accepted to the school, the easiest way to be refused is on temporary intent. So if you are applying for a visa, to document yourself with regard to temporary intent and your ties to your home country, I think is going to be crucial. I think you have to have as much documentation as you possibly can with regard to your case and with regard to your ties, so that when you go to the consulate and you apply, that you are able to convince the officer that you do have that temporary intent and you can come to the United States and you will leave. I think that's going to be paramount with regard to that. In terms of the student visa, I mean, once you get a student visa and you get your OPT at the end, the issue is that, of course, with the lottery on the H1s, and it makes it difficult to get an H1 in any event. And we are, for instance, contacted by companies all the time that have an individual who is in OPT status and has applied, and they've tried to get that person in H1, and they can't. They've not been picked. And a year goes by, and if they're on STEM, they have the extension, but they don't get picked. And so the company is looking to see if they can go work in another place for that company elsewhere in the world or something of the sort. So the advice I would have, realistically speaking, is that once you're here on the OPT, I mean, it's not, you don't really have control of this situation. And unless they expand the number of H1s that they're willing to give in a year, realistically speaking, I would probably look at, on practical advice, working for a company that maintains as a multinational corporation that can send you other places if they need to, if that's at all possible.
That's good advice. I think that we should consider for sure, folks out there. I think you should look onto that too. And, David, I think we'll quickly take Jaya Kumar's question if that is fine.
Sure.
So let's go with it. I got 221G issued with white slip, and after a week got an email that intend to revoke from consulate in India. What are the chances of getting approved if my employer responds back?
That's a very good question. So first of all, for anyone that wants to know, 221G means they need more information. So there's various ways that a consulate can refuse you. It could be under a section called 214B, which is that temporary intent section. The one you don't want is something called 212AC, because that's misrepresentation and that's horrendous. 221G means that they need more information, or so they're refusing the case pending more information coming in. It's a refusal, but it's kind of not a refusal, because it means that they're still considering the case and are okay to get more information. Now, I don't know the background of this case in the sense, why is there an intent to revoke? Is there an intent to revoke because they came upon other information that sort of speaks against what was previously submitted? Have they perhaps done an investigation and figured out that there isn't something here that they need that didn't occur, or something of the sort? So in answer to your question, what are the odds? It depends on why they're going to revoke. If they're going to revoke because they have definite objective information that's not good, then the odds may not be that high. But if the intent to revoke is based on a misunderstanding or information that they didn't get or thought or they misread, then it could be fine. Realistically speaking, I mean, whatever you do, when you file that information that is supposed to that they want, please make sure it's as fulsome as possible, because you're going to get one crack at this. So if you're filing that information that's in addition to what they want to try to address the revocation, make sure it's as fulsome and as packed with whatever you need as possible. Don't play games with it. Because also, and again, I don't know the background, if you submit information that isn't helpful and they are looking at it and saying, well, we're revoking this because we think there is misrepresentation, then you could get slapped with that 212A6C, which is never a good thing, and it could be very deleterious to the case.
Right, David. Thank you so much for taking that up for Jaya. And Jaya, thank you for your question. Really great question. If you have any further questions, you can keep commenting. And we have Jorge saying hello, and he has a question. What can an experienced engineer in the IT industry that is a non-US citizen do to get a working visa, any type?
In the US or anywhere, I guess, in the US?
Yes, that is a non-US citizen, maybe in the US. Yes, in the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah. I mean, realistically speaking, it depends on your citizenship, of course. If you're Australian, for instance, you may be able to get an E3 visa. Or if you are, let's put it this way. So there's different types of visas you can get depending on citizenship as well. So if in the normal course, everybody knows about the oh yes, in the US. Okay, good. Everybody knows about the H1. Right? You have to have an employer. The employer has to register. You have to register that expression of interest. The rates of acceptance haven't been that high. They've had a lot of applications, and a lot of people have not been chosen. But that is the normal way that most people do get visas. There's something called an L1, an intercompany transfer. So if you, for instance, are an engineer and you go work for a company overseas for a year, and that company then wants to do this L1 intercompany transfer, they can do that to send you into the United States. If you go work for a company that has your nationality, there's treaties of navigation and trade. It's commonly called the E-visa. So if you have the same nationality as the company ownership, then they can try to get you a visa under the E-visa category. If you're Canadian, then you have the free trade agreement that you can look at, or Mexican for that matter. So there are various possibilities. That being said, the most common way an individual gets to the United States, all things being equal, is if a US company petitions for them under the H1 category. Actually, there's one more as well. If you are a person of extraordinary ability, and in that you are one of the top individuals in your field, you've written articles, there's been news about you, all that kind of thing, then you can apply for something called an O1, which is extraordinary ability. You have to be a very high level, though. It's not, they realize with the cap on H1s, a lot of people are going to try for O's. So you can't do it if you don't have at least, unless you've written a lot of articles or some scholarly, and unless you've been featured in a lot of different ways, it probably wouldn't be relevant.
Definitely. And by free trade agreement, you mean NAFTA, right?
Well, it used to be NAFTA. The US calls it the USMCA now. Canada calls it the CUSMA. And to be honest, they have no clue what Mexico calls it at this point.
Okay, but Jorge, you have a lot of options out there. Depends where do you actually fit. So you might as well go consult an expert. And I would always say, yes, you need an attorney. So it'll be good to be guided by an expert. Thank you so much. And now going on to our next question. And definitely, if you want to have a one-on-one consultation with David, you have his contact details on the screen. You can email David at garsonil.com, and you can go visit www.garsonil.com. Thank you so much. And let's go to our next question, David. And that is DJ4496 asking, hi, my husband is primary. We are from India on EB2. We got our green card EAD for 5 years. Our priority date is September 30, 2014. So my question is, when can we expect green card?
It's going to be a long time. It'd probably be within that 5 years. Well, right now, I'll take that back. Right now, it could be within the 5 years, but it is taking 5 to 7 years in that regard. However, that is also something else that may change come the new administration. These things could get elongated out. As you probably know, many people find themselves in a priority date that is current, or you think it's almost current, and then it doesn't move for a long time. The issue is that come the new administration, one of the things they can do as well is slow down the priority date processing. So that takes a while. I mean, the fact that you have a green card EAD for 5 years is good news. I mean, that keeps you there for a long time, and hopefully, there is also the president-elect did go on radio and talk about the fact that people that graduate from U.S. universities should be eligible for green cards as long as they do everything right and they've done everything that is appropriate. So, you can't always think that he's going to, or they're going to do anything that's that detrimental. It could be that if he's looking at who is applying and that they need individuals in that field that are applying, and I mean, he may speed up green card processing in certain situations. He may be tougher in others, but to your point, your husband has the EB2 approval. You have a 5-year work permit. Hopefully, within the next 4 years or so, you should be able to get a green card.
I think 4 years is not so bad. I mean, for
Not
many
easy.
folks out there, it's decades.
But again, we don't know.
We don't know.
That's the problem with having this in November when a new president is taking office in January, and you have no clue what he's doing. Somebody asked a question about Tom Holman being appointed today as the new border czar. Yeah.
True.
I'll answer. I was just looking at that. What are your views, Tom Holman being appointed as a border czar by Trump administration? Should people be scared given his known stance on immigration and mass
Deportation, Drive 10, yes.
Well, he was the head of ICE before, and he is a tough guy on this. In terms of being scared, I think that Trump is sending a message, certainly. One of the cornerstones of his campaign was talking about deportations, right? I think Vice President-elect Vance talked about deporting 1 million people a year. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. Let's be blunt. They're not. First of all, how are they going to find them? I mean, where do you, if they're out of status in the States, where do you go? I mean, you have to locate people. But I think Mr. Holman is a very tough guy. I think that it is sending a message. I think that if you're going to look to deport people and you're going to look to be restrictive, he would be the man for the job. Yeah, I think that's what he's doing there. That all being said, the courts are there for a reason. And like I said, in the last Trump administration, a lot of what they wanted to do was thwarted by the courts. So once somebody is taken into custody and they move towards deportation, I mean, I'm not a deportation lawyer, enforcement lawyer in that regard, but there is access that a court can comment on with regard to any of this. But yes, I think sorry to go on, but I think having Mr. Holman as the border czar will mean that the Trump administration is going to try to do what they said they were going to do.
Right. And this could be one of the biggest mass deportation in the history of United States, I guess. Let's see what
I
it
think
holds.
that's, I think that he wants to try. I mean, um,
Let's see.
yeah, and then somebody said they were talking about deporting illegals. If you're there illegally, there's nothing to fear. I agree with that.
Right.
I agree with
Yes.
that. I think if you're in
Jorge.
the United States legally, I don't see anybody wanting to deport you. I don't think they can. To
Hmm.
be they can't if you're there legally. The question is that they could create situations where you can't extend your status, or that it would be too difficult to extend your status. And in those situations, then you have to leave. But in terms of being gathered up by ICE and deported, no.
True. True. Thank you so much. David, for taking that up for Drive 10, and even Jorge, thank you again. So we have our next question. This is Akshay. Akshay is on YouTube asking, would the consulate officer check my past employment history after my MS? Now, if I am applying for a PhD, what should I be careful about?
So they kind of check my employment after my master's degree. Well, yeah, if they have information, I mean, realistically, when you fill out, when you're at the consulate and they're asking you questions, after you got your master's degree, I'm assuming you did your OPT. If that's the case, then they may look at that. Certainly, yes.
Mhm.
If you're applying for your PhD, um, if you're not extending status and you're going to a consulate and apply, then it pretty much is what I've just discussed, and that is the temporary intent issue, and the
Mm.
fact that you're transparent with regard to what you're going to be doing and what you're doing and how you're going to be doing it. The fact that you're going for your PhD should, by practicality, make it easier to get a visa, because it does show you have certainly serious intent towards your education to get a PhD. And it's normally, when you get higher in the educational sphere, it normally would make it not easier per se, but the officer would understand you've had, especially if you've had visas there before, that
Mhm.
been you've adhered to U.S. immigration policy, and that you've been someone that is credible. Okay, and I think that has a lot to do with it, credibility, when you're applying for any visa, because if you do things that they don't particularly care for, or have done things they don't care for, then you lose your credibility with immigration, and that's when things go awry. And that's
Right.
good. You did your OPT in STEM and then return back to your home country. I think that's very good. It shows that you adhere to U.S. immigration, that you follow the rules, and that they can count on you to follow rules. And I think that having a track record like that is important.
True. True. And I think that is a plus point for you, Akshay. Thank you so much for your question. And if you have any more questions, you can keep commenting. Well, he says, yes, I did my OPT and STEM and then returned back to my home country. Very
Yep.
nice. Following the rules. There you go. And thank you so much. Even DJ4469 says, thank you for answering the question. Great. Well, David, now I have another question, and that is, if an F1 student's OPT is set to expire in 2025, what options
Yeah.
do they have for extending their work authorization, especially with the potential changes in US immigration policies? What do you suggest?
Yeah. This is an easy answer, not much. There isn't that much to do, in the sense that if your OPT is expiring and you don't have, my phone's going up here, sorry. If your OPT is expiring and you don't have a STEM OPT extension that you can look at, or you can't get another type of work permit based on nationality or a treaty or something of the sort, then there really isn't that much for you to do. As I said, though, we have seen companies, multinational companies, where somebody has an OPT and they're with them for a year. And then the company says, you know what, we are going to put you and you're going to work for our subsidiary or our parent or our affiliate in another country. Then that being the case, if they do that and you're in that with that company in another, sorry, if you're with that company in another country, then if you work there for a year, they can then look for an L1 intercompany transfer to bring you back to the United States. By the way, that is another possibility where they may be more restrictive going forward. There's such a visa called an L1, and an L1 is an intercompany transfer. And you can do an L1 for a manager or executive or a specialized knowledge person. And specialized knowledge usually means a unique knowledge. It's both proprietary to the company and a knowledge of the field. So if they wanted to slow down people who are coming to the United States in specialized knowledge L1s, they could do so, again, not by changing legislation, but simply by making the criteria more rigorous and saying it's going to be harder for you to get an L1 because we want to see a lot more within what you've done and your history and your experience and things like that. So that could be something else that they look at. But if you're in OPT and you don't really have any, you can't extend it, and you can't qualify for another type of work permit based on, as I said, other factors, and unfortunately, there isn't really much that I can see that you can do.
Well, thank you so much for that, David. But I think that's all we can do for 2025 then. And I'd
Yeah,
quickly like to say hello to Jemshid. Thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn. And then we also have Ezzy Lydia. Lydia, thank you so much for joining us. Hello, everyone. I am Lydia. She says, hello. Now I have my next question to you, David, and that is what impact will the expected changes to work permits and student visas have on industries that rely heavily on international talent, such as technology and healthcare?
that's a good. Well, and this is what I was talking about before. That it would be very. I think it could be pretty detrimental in those situations, which leads me to believe that there will be individuals surrounding the president-elect that could talk to him about this, i.e., Elon Musk or someone of the sort. I mean, he doesn't want to, cut off his nose to spite his face necessarily. He understands that there are areas where people need employees, and if you don't have them, then things are going to not be as I guess you could say they won't be as they won't go as well as they should for that industry and for that company. So realistically speaking, I think it will have a deleterious effect on those companies and that industry, which leads me hopefully to believe that they will see that and make allowances in certain areas.
Okay, but definitely, I mean, especially where US needs talent from, different countries where, US may not have theirs. And I think this is something that is going to be affected for sure. So, David, thank you for highlighting that. Now, I have another question, and that is if a university student on an F1 visa receives an unexpected job offer before graduation, what immediate steps should they take to ensure compliance with the new work permit regulations under the Trump administration?
Yeah, well, they won't be able to do again. They'll have to. I mean, realistically speaking, they can do their CPT, which is part-time work within the context of when they're studying, and that's fine. But and they have to be able to do that and get approval to do that. But realistically speaking, if you under this administration, we don't know what they're going to do with the OPT and what they're going to do with regard to the student visas, because in the normal course you can't work if you're on a student visa. You have to go to school. In certain circumstances, a spouse may be able to, if things go very bad and in hardship circumstances, there may be ways for a person to get a EAD, but in the normal course, they can't do much in that regard. They have to be compliant. That's more. I think that is a lesson that going forward is going to be as important as anything, and that is under this administration, you have to remain compliant to the letter of the law. Because I think that if you do anything that's not going to be completely by the book, you could find yourself in a situation where you will be removed from the United States or put yourself in a position where you could be removed from the United States. So in any event, if you get an offer of employment, you can't necessarily leave. I'm sorry, you can't necessarily start working. You have to wait until you're eligible to work. You wait for that, then you can start to work. And any employer that is interested in hiring you, and frankly speaking, has worked in the system before, will understand that. Remain compliant. More than anything else, remain compliant.
Thank you, David. I think that is a great advice. And folks out there, you definitely need to stay vigilant, compliant, go by the rules, be on the right track, and stay hopeful. I think that is what I can say for now. And yes, absolutely. Go contact Attorney David Garson, and he's definitely going to direct you at least how to go about it if you have any confusions, or especially that every case is different and you might need special attention. So why not email David? His email address is david@garsonil.com. And you can also go visit his website, www.garsonil.com. Thank you, David. And okay, Akshay is back saying, I'm sorry I missed the first 15 minutes of this session, but I wanted to ask about the implications on OPT and STEM OPT going in the future. Do you want to say that?
Sure. As I was saying, we don't know. There's been a lot of discussion regarding it, to be honest with you. In fact, this is probably the area that has been focused on the most by pundits and newspaper reporters and things. To sort of, what is this administration going to do with the OPT and STEM OPT? The OPT, the STEM OPT was established by the Obama administration. I think that the Trump administration, in this first go around, tried to get rid of it, as I recall, or tried to limit it, and they weren't able to do so. That doesn't mean they aren't going to try again. The OPT, I mean, I don't see them really. I don't see them stopping the OPT. I really don't. I don't know why they would. I think that it's helpful to employers. It's helpful to the individuals. But I don't know that it would be expanded in any way, shape, or form. Unless, and I mentioned this at the beginning, as I said, under the last administration, the person who was responsible for advising the president was a fellow named Stephen Miller, who was pretty restricted. I don't know that this person is advising the president under this this administration. I think Elon Musk is having a lot of say in this. And that being the case, if he listens to that kind of individual, then he may understand the importance of people who are in STEM or technology or even trades, to be honest with you. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people, they say there's 11 million people who are out of status in the United States. I don't know. I haven't looked at the statistics, but I'm kind of thinking that a lot of them are in construction and in trades in places that need them. So for instance, there was just a hurricane in North Carolina. There's always hurricanes in Florida, things like that. They have to rebuild their infrastructure. And I'm not sure there's enough people who are US citizens or green card holders who can do that. So I think practically, and I think this, I don't want to say it's a secret, but I think most people believe or think that a lot of the people that are working in trades and construction and tech, well, I was going to say technology, not so much, but trades and construction are probably people who are out of status. And so if the president or this administration wanted to look at something like that, there may be a possibility of I don't want to say an amnesty because people freak out when I say the word amnesty, but of a possibility of creating a pathway for individuals who work in certain sectors and have worked in those sectors for a while to get permanent residence, especially if they're needed.
There you
Somebody
go,
just
Akshay. Thank you. Yes.
somebody just put a comment that Elon will be the savior of the STEM people.
He the same guy. Akshay is the guy only. So he was also
Yeah,
saying, also it is true that you can use STEM OPT only once. For example,
that's
if I
true.
used STEM during my master's, then I
No,
cannot use it after my PhD. Please clarify.
correct. Yes.
That's true. That's true, Akshay. So there you have it. Thank you. Thank you so much, David, for taking that up. Jorge says, just want to thank David for this session. He's very well spoken and knowledgeable. Definitely. Thank you so much, David, for joining us and making time for this.
That's very
Now, my
nice. Thank
next
you.
question. Yes, thank you. Next question for you, David, is how will the proposed restrictions on OPT affect international students pursuing STEM degrees, and what steps can students take to mitigate these changes? We've been discussing this over and over, and maybe if you have any more points to
Yeah, no, I think I pretty much
give
said
up.
everything I can say. We don't know
Yeah,
what they're going to do. Everything may change or nothing may change. I know I sound, that's an easy thing to say. It gets me out of a lot of questions, but
no, but
I
true.
do think based on previous experience, meaning the government's previous governing, or this government's previous governing, that things will get more restrictive. It will be tougher to get cases approved. They don't need to change the law to do that. The L1s, the H1s, they could take away spousal. I'm going away from OPTs, I apologize, but they could take away spousal work permits from the H2s or the L2s. I'm sorry, the H4s and the L2s. They could take away, meaning if right now, if I'm on an H or an L, my spouse can get a work permit. They could take that away. And by taking that away, it lessens the, I guess, desirability of people coming to the United States. Because if their spouse can't work, then what are you doing? That's not very fair. It's fair, but it's their country. But what I'm saying is it's not as attractive to somebody who's coming. So they could do all sorts of things. So in terms of the OPT, I don't know that they'll do anything significant. I think the STEM OPT, that in itself is up for grabs. And to that person's point of view, Elon may be the savior. Who knows?
For sure. Okay, well, what do you want to say about the H1B lottery? Maybe of course, we are going to expect changes, everything immigration related. But do you have anything to say on that H1B
Well,
lottery system?
yeah. I mean, the 65,000. It's always it's a mad rush when cap season comes and employers file the expressions of interest and wherever it's usually 20, 15, 20, 25% that get picked. I can't see them going a lot higher than that. If they wanted to do things that were, I guess you could say, innovative, and then they could change that cap for the various industries that people go into. So for instance, there's a lot of people in STEM, a lot of US citizens, and a lot of green card holders in that sense. So if you have if you have a degree in a STEM field and they need STEM people, then they can absolutely say, you know what, we can raise a cap in this area. We can get more people in this area. Why we need them? Or it could be another field or something of the sort. In the sense of that. So they could be innovative. You never know. Things could go better than it has been before. In that way, they could be somewhat creative and think outside of the box when they're doing these kinds of things, or they may just be completely restrictive. In other words, it may be a very good hedge, and it would be a good legacy for this administration if they changed the immigration policy and made it something that was more utilitarian for everybody, so that it's functional and practical, not necessarily a one size fits all.
True, true. And maybe I mean, everything you say cannot happen. I mean, even Trump cannot say that whatever he has said can happen, right?
Right. No, that's exactly the case. I mean, in the end, um, it will depend upon who the president surrounds themselves with, right? It goes to the fact that if you are in a field or in an area that the president believes is important to the country, then he could basically do it he could do things that would be a great help to the US. And then, as I said, he's very concerned about his legacy. It could really help his legacy.
Right. Right. Thank you so much, David, for that. And, I had some more questions from people who keep commenting on our um, groups and YouTube channel. So I think I would like to share that. But hold on, not this one. Okay. So this was on nationwide protest on Canada 2 months back when they were talking about deportation. But if you find it relevant and if you want to take them up, you may want to give out some views or perspective on this. So, when you apply as an international student in Canada, you are required to write a letter stating you will return to your country once you complete your studies. That was the agreement they signed.
Yeah. Sorry. Is there a question or?
It's just a comment. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
then we have, let me take this up for now. This is from Dixit. Asking urgent, I went for my first H1B visa stamping yesterday and learned that my F1 visa was revoked. I was sent for second interview on same day, but my visa is cancelled. The interviewer told me that I was involved in a fraud with my first OPT employer. My other friends have worked with this employer, but they had no visa issues. Did anyone else? Do you want to say anything on this?
Yeah, I've seen this before. It's a scam.
Okay.
So what it is that I've had people consult me on this, and that is they get an OPT for an employer that they're not really working for. And so, but the employer says that they're working for them. And so, and they go ahead and they have their OPT, and then they can get the extension on the STEM and things of the sort. But realistically speaking, they're not working for the employer, and either I think, in the worst case scenarios, they pay the employer to basically say that. So, that unfortunately is a fraud scheme that
Mhm.
I've seen before and keep turning up. It leads me to believe that the authorities or the State Department or USCIS or CBP have been alerted to it and are now looking for it. So when somebody gets an F1 and they get an OPT and then they say, okay, I'm working for Mary's company, being a systems analyst or a software developer, and they're not really working for a Mary's company, they may be working at the Walmart or something of the sort, but they get that letter. And then when they go to get the H1, if they're picked, or they go to get a STEM extension, and it comes out, then that's pretty bad, because then you do get charged with misrepresentation and you lose your ability to stay in the States and or go to the States.
Okay. Thank you so much, David, for taking that up. And now I have my next question, and that is also from this is with regard to the I-20. Got admission offer for spring, haven't filed I-20 yet. Now wanted to change my term to fall. At what point should I request for change of term before getting F1 visa or after I get F1 visa? Or should I select defer in I-20 form to next term and submit? Get confirmation from uni for fall, university for fall, file the new I-120 then, or submit I-120 for spring now, get visa, and then ask university to change term to fall. Which one of
Well,
the options will be better?
so I need to see it. Can you make it bigger so I can read it? I can't.
Sure. This is, I think, how it goes.
Okay. So I'm going to do it myself here for a second. Sorry. Got an offer for spring, haven't filed it. Now I want to change my term to fall. At what point should I change? No, don't go to the consulate if you're not going. Should I select defer in I-20 for the next term and submit? If conference or submit I-20 for spring. Well, I would advise, I mean, this is my opinion. And again, it's not, I can't give you legal advice, but if you got admission to the offer for spring, and when you say file your I-20, or you mean going to the consulate, I'm assuming. Now, if
Mhm.
you're changing fall, don't go to the consulate with an I-20 saying you're going to spring term, because that's misrepresentation. You're telling them you're going to and you're not. So in the I-20, when you go to submit, get confirmation of the fall, fill in, yeah. I would get a proper I-20 for the session you're going to before you go to the consulate, and then apply to go for that session. I wouldn't go at all. I wouldn't play with going to, especially now. I wouldn't go to the consulate with an I-20 that has a different session than you're actually going to attend.
Okay. Thank you so much, David. I think that will be very much helpful. Thank you for that advice. And now I'll quickly take up my next question. And that is, my wife got admission in MBA in US. Should we apply F2 visa for spouse and kids along with her F1 visa application in one go? Or after she
Yeah.
gets F1 and lands in United States, then we apply for F2 visa?
It's a very good question. I get this a bit, in the sense, what strategically is probably the better way to go. I mean, either way, they're going to be looking at it in the sense of temporariness of intent, right? So if you're going to your MBA, and it depends, realistically, this is going to sound, not fair, but it isn't. It depends where you're applying from, and it depends on your monetary situation, and it depends on the circumstances surrounding yourself. Meaning, let's say you apply from a country that the U.S. has, their statistics show that people don't come back or they stay, and meaning you are not from a family that is wealthy or you have wealth, and in that regard, it's again, it doesn't sound good, and it kind of makes people say, well, why can't I go if somebody else goes? But the truth is, if you're applying for a visa and the consulate is convinced you will return to your home country, or you have the resources to support yourself and go to your home country, they're going to be a lot less restrictive. So to your question, if somebody's applying for an F1 and the F2 and for yourself, your spouse and children, you can all go at the same time if you are confident that you are from a certain situation that make this, again, less restrictive. If you go separately, it's no guarantee that your spouse is going to get it if you didn't all go together. I guess my point is that I don't know if it makes too much difference. I think what matters most in that circumstance is whether or not you are of a certain individual or person that the consulate is confident that everybody will come back. So in the end, if you are from a certain strata that unfairly is treated a bit differently, then you can all go together. If not, then you can go separately, but it doesn't mean that your spouse and kids are going to get the visa if you go separately. You're still going to be subject to those issues and that kind of scrutiny.
Thank you so much, David, for such a truthful opinion and help. Thank you so much. I wish I knew this participant's name, but it's anonymous post. So thank you so much for taking that up. Now, moving on, this is my next. This is Hi guys, I need your suggestions. I am admitted to UT Dallas for masters with a scholarship. However, I realized that I could have applied to UT Austin, Rice, UIUC. However, my visa is scheduled later this month. Do you guys recommend me to defer it and apply to these universities? Is it worth it? Or should I just go to UT Dallas? What do you
Yeah,
suggest?
I don't think it much matters, to be honest. I don't know that it matters. Um, Somebody asked a question about, do you expect positively, negatively affecting any
Yes,
policy?
Hari Guru, let's take that up. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't see anything. If you are in valid status and you have the 485 is a change of status, by the way, and then you've made
Mhm.
application to change status and you're in valid status and you're doing everything right, I don't know that it'll affect it negatively or positively. I don't think it'll affect it at all. I think it's being slow as it is, to your point. You've been there for 3 or 4 years waiting for your priority date. So I guess only negatively if they decide to slow down processing instead,
Mhm.
which they have the ability to do. So if that's the case, then sure, that's negative. But in either event, if all things being equal and they're not looking to cause trouble to people in that situation, then I don't think I think it's a neutral answer. The only way it will affect negatively, as I said, if they decide to slow down processing as a means to limit immigration, meaning they don't have to change legislation to change processing and the law and how many people come, because they can make it more difficult within the parameters and the tools that they have already.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking that up, David. And now I have another question. This was on our YouTube channel. This was asked by Vijay Kumar. I am on my F1 visa OPT and recently got approved for H1B I-797B consular services. Since I am in US and working for employer on OPT, can my employer refile for new I-129 as change of status so that I can continue working on H1B and no need to travel for stamping? Thanks.
Yeah, but they could, but I'm curious as why they didn't. Um, to be honest, I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't to begin with. There must have been a reason necessarily. The second is that even if you do get you change your status, you can't travel at all unless you get that visa. So once you get a 797 and you don't have a change of status, then you have to travel to the consulate that you need to go to even to travel. So it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to do it, to be honest with you. I would go and do it, especially if you get the approval and you were in the States and you went to school in the States. There's no temporary intent for an H1. So that's a good thing. So you don't have to satisfy that. So the only thing they could really refuse you under is if they think that it wasn't a real job offer, or you don't have the qualifications or things like that. But given that you went to school in the States, given that you work for the employer in the States, if it's real, then I wouldn't be afraid of the consul.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking that up for Vijay Kumar, David. And I think we'll just go on with one last question, and I think that should be. Um, Let me just see if this is the one. Or I think we've taken up all of them for now. Yes, but if you want to give a view on this, hello. In my case, I have an F1 status to H4 status. I am in USA, but I just have the status, not a visa stamp. Would this
There,
process be the same for me? And once I upload my documents, do I need to keep studying during the processing time?
so if they've already changed their status to H4, they don't study at all because they can't. They're in H4 unless they get approval to do it. But that's what I was just talking about, in the sense that they have a visa, they have status, so they can't go anywhere. And until, I mean, you're changing status from F1 to H4, and they're asking, okay, well, can I keep studying? Do you have to keep studying? No. Are they studying? I mean, did they finish? You know what I mean? Every situation is as it is. If they are still in F1 status and they file the change of status to H4, realistically speaking, they should stay in F1 status until they get an approval to H4, right? They shouldn't. So should they? If they're supposed to keep studying, yes, keep studying. If you are done, then you've nothing to study. So you are in that status until you change your status, until you get an approval to change your status. By just filing the application to change status does not give you the new status. So you have to wait until the new status is approved before you can do whatever you want to do or not do whatever you want to do. In this case, not study. And in terms of travel, correct. They can't go anywhere. And if they do, they need a new visa.
Thank you so much, David. I mean, that was really wonderful, taking up all these questions so patiently and giving us all your point of views and expert advice, I would say. So thank you so much. And maybe we could wrap up if you want to say anything about maybe AI or these latest things that are trending right now, technology-wise or student-wise. And maybe even Akshay's last question. DHS says you can use STEM OPT twice. Please
Yeah,
confirm.
yeah. Actually, do you want to contact me on that? Because I want to look at something. So if you want to contact me, I'm happy to answer it. Okay.
Absolutely. And so, yes, David, maybe you would want to say anything with regard to AI.
Well, it's funny. As I said, I'm dual licensed in Canada and the US, and Canada uses AI a lot in adjudication. And frankly speaking, I hate it. It's just because what happens is that if anything is out of the ordinary, it picks it up. Meaning, if you have a difficult case, and then it makes it more difficult. It goes to the officer becomes increasingly suspicious. And when the officer becomes increasingly suspicious, they're harder on the case. And AI as well is refusing a lot. Refusals have gone up, I think, by 12% using AI. So the US isn't quite there yet. It isn't really using AI per se, but it will. And I can only say that when they start using AI, refusals will rise. Because just psychologically speaking, right? If you get a case as an officer and you adjudicate it, fine, that's great. It can be a yes or no. And then when you have AI, if AI says, yeah, you should approve this case, you should approve this case, you should approve this case, you start to rely on it. But then when AI takes a case and says, well, there's something different here, you should look at it, the officer's perspective right away becomes negative, thinking, well, why didn't AI approve it immediately? And so that creates a harsher result, in my opinion, with regard to adjudication.
Thank you so much, David. Really, such a great session. I wish we didn't have to wrap it up as quick, but thank you so much. And folks out there, do contact attorney David Garson, and maybe when you do, let him know that you found him here on Immigration and Jobs Talk Show, and tell him about your case, and maybe for sure he's going to be happy to help you. So his email address is david@garsonil.com, and his website is www.garsonil.com. So definitely go visit and contact David. Thank you so much, David, for doing this today.
Pleasure. Have a good day.
You too, have a good day, and I hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you. Myself as well.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And folks out there, thank you so much for joining us once again. It's really lovely that you did. And please do not forget to like, share, and definitely subscribe to our channel. It's Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. You can hit that bell icon so that, whenever we have sessions like these, you are notified. And definitely, if you resonated and if you think that your friends and folks out there can also resonate with this kind of content, don't forget to share, please. And also, my number is where you can also contact me on WhatsApp. This is my number, 408-335-6444. You can also email me. My email address is nipa@staffingly.com, and go visit www.staffingly.com to get to know more about us. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all out there have a great day and a splendid week ahead. See you again. Stay tuned to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show.